Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, and welcome to the final author interview for the month of November here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, and joining me today is an author I am so excited to have here on the show. Now, my guest today spent most of her childhood on stage or reading, as both activities let her live in fantastic stories. She moved to LA to study acting at UCLA and eventually branched out into costume design, playwriting, prose, and got an MBA in entertainment marketing, becoming the marketing director for kids and family entertainment at Shout Studios. Her award-winning debut novel, Gold Spun, is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. Curse Undone is the second book in the duology, and if you've been following her on her social media, you will know that her most latest book, which was published in October of this year, is The Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, which I had the opportunity to read and review for my website. Her theater credits include Truly Outrageous and Unofficial Gem and the Holograms parody, and The Importance of Being Oscar. She's a volunteer story coach for middle and high school students through SpiritCorps and mentor through Youth Mentoring Connections. She lives with her husband, 2 spoiled rescue pups, 3 spoiled birds, and 5 bookshelves. And she is also an amazing person. I first met this incredible author at this year's LA Festival of Books, and more recently, we crossed paths at this past Orange County Book Fair, where we both were at our own signings. And today I'm so excited to have her on the show to talk to her all about her books. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause to our final author of the month, my good friend and fellow author, Brandie June. Brandie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and such a wonderful introduction.
Awesome, Brandie. I am so excited to have you here on the show and to dive everything into your incredible works. But before we do so, here's a little icebreaker question. Is there a little fun fact about yourself that a lot of people may not know about?
So here's a new one, actually. I just recently helped design a tattoo based on my new book that I got done earlier this month, actually. It's on the back of my neck, so I can...
Oh,
so.
There we go. Oh, there we go. That is beautiful.
Yep, so I just got it done, and I love it so much because it has all the elements of like the magic and the theater and the dragonfly. So that's sort of a new tattoo edition.
Nice, nice. And speaking of Dragonfly, today, viewers and listeners, we're going to be talking about Brandie's recently published book, Magic at the Dragonfly Theater. So, Brandie, without giving too much away to our viewers, what can they expect from your third book?
So, this is a standalone. So, it's a new YA fantasy standalone. And Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater is about 2 sisters in a Victorian era theater. One has like a secret illegal magic she has to hide, while the other has no magic, but she's the one who does all the sleight of hand, all the illusions. She's the one who performs on stage. And then a young bounty hunter infiltrates the theater, trying to like suss out what's going on, and starts to fall for the leading lady.
Nice. Very, very nice. And viewers and listeners, if you do get a chance to read my review of Brandie's incredible book, you will not be disappointed. It is such an incredible read. And honestly, it was a nice change of pace from what I've been typically reading as of late. And it's such a great story. It really grabbed my attention from the very get-go. And we're going to be talking all about that and more. But first, let's talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes, the creation of the book, as well as the person behind the story. So, Brandie, let's dive into your background. So, from your bio, you got into acting. You have a degree in entertainment marketing. You've also worked in theater. So, pretty much, the creative bug hit you right away from the get-go. So, I'm very curious. At what point in your career did the prospects of becoming a writer come about?
So that actually became somewhat later in my career, actually.
Okay.
Started out as an actor. I was on stage even before I could read. I was doing theater as a kid. I, wanted to be an actor when I grew up. I studied acting in undergrad and college. So that was really my main creative focus. And it wasn't until after college, and honestly, even after going back to grad school and starting to work in marketing and wanting to still have that creative outlet, where I started to dabble in writing. And even then, I didn't think that I'd be writing books at first. I didn't even think I'd be writing plays. But a theater company I was with had short play challenges. So I was like, well, maybe I can't write a whole play, but I could write 5 pages. And so those short stories, those short plays eventually encouraged me to start writing longer plays. And similarly, I started writing more short stories in prose and participating in NaNoWriMo, which was National Novel Writing Month, so writing 50,000 words in November. And even though the first one I wrote will probably never see the light of day, it encouraged me. It, kind of gave me that confidence that, oh, yes, I can actually write a whole book if I so choose to. And that really inspired me to continue writing and writing more. And eventually I had these books. And really what I found as sort of a through line of when I was an actor, then when I was a writer, and, a lot of the creative endeavors I've done in between, is that ultimately my through line is that I'm a storyteller. So I've told stories on stage. I've told stories by writing the story. And for me, the creation of these stories is what I really love doing.
Nice. Very, very nice. So now let's dive into that journey of yours, that author path of yours. So when you began writing, I'm actually going to make not comparisons, but beginning with your first books, the duology of the Rumpelstiltskin retelling, when you began with those books and began plotting out the ideas, what really surprised you about the writing aspect of being an author as opposed to the theater world and the playwriting world?
So when you write prose versus when you're doing theater, you have a lot more freedom to change scenes and settings. So in theater, you can change a scene. There are a lot of scene changes, but it's a much more elaborate process because you physically have to be changing scenes on stage, so you need to make it more physically feasible. Where when you're writing a book, you can kind of be jumping from one side of the world to another in the next chapter if you want. So that was sort of a liberating in a way. You also don't need to worry about the feasibility of how the feasibility in real life, where even special effects on stage you need a way to do them. Whereas in a book, I can have magic, I can have magically transformed gold, and I just have to describe it. So I do feel like, though, that my theatrical background has really kind of led me to be sort of a theatrical-esque writer, in the way that I do still really love setting the stage and really, describing the events and the actions in a way that I want to feel experiential for the readers.
Nice. Very nice. So now jumping ahead to Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, how did that idea come about? Did you draw from your own personal experiences in the world of theater? And when you finally had the idea, did you have a distinct outline from beginning to end, or did the story just come about organically by the seam of your pants?
So like I said, I've done theater my whole life, so I drew very heavily on my theatrical experience. I very much wanted to show readers, both that magic that happens as an audience when you go and you sit in the theater and the lights go off and you're in total darkness, and then all of a sudden the lights are going to come on and you'll be transported to this new magical experience. So I wanted that, but I also wanted the behind the scenes of like both
Right.
the community that forms with the theater company, as well as just the chaos of backstage, of rehearsal process, of like all the blood, sweat, and tears that go into making a show happen. So for that, I really drew a lot on my own experience. I also really wanted this book to have both fantasy magic as well as real world magic, sort of the sleight of hands, the coin tricks, the card tricks. And so I actually started studying magic at the Magic Castle in Hollywood as part of my research.
Ooh, okay.
And I loved it. I loved it so much. I'm actually still taking classes there because I really wanted the book to sort of interweave what's real, what's an illusion, what's, you know, what you can actually do versus what's fantasy. And I've actually pulled some of that into some of my book events where I'll do some magic too to kind of bring that magic element to life. So those were sort of my research processes of, you know, both what I researched as well as drawing from my own experience. I'm definitely I am a plotter, although my initial plot the first draft kind of varies from the actual outline, but I need to have that outline. And when I started, I just had this one image in my head. The first thing that came to me was a young woman on stage. And I imagined her like the only one on stage with like just a single spotlight on her and in this gorgeous Victorian black dress with little like silver stars. And she's performing for an audience. And it's such a beautiful, magical performance that you couldn't tell what was real or what was magic about it. And that was sort of the very first image I had that came to me. And I'm like, this is the start of a story. And then I actually had to write the whole rest of the story. But that for me was the very first nugget of where I thought I had a story.
Awesome. All right. So it's safe to say that not only is this book a great fantasy story, but it's also in a way a little bit of, some would argue, a little bit of a love letter and a memoir of your time in the theater world. As you said, you know, not only the performance side, you know, the creation of these elaborate plays and theatricality elements, but also the behind the scenes, the blood, sweat, and tears, getting everyone in costume, knowing everyone's place, when to appear, when to leave, and so forth. I definitely got that vibe from the book because now, as you explained it, you definitely want to show the true, authentic side of what it is to be part of a theater group, and you really nail the head perfectly, Brandie. And with that being said, there's going to be a few fan questions which I've gathered that a lot of my viewers want to ask. And one of my viewers asked, which character, in your opinion, embodies the most of you as the author?
Ooh, okay, that's tough. Because I feel like, so the two main characters are the sisters, and for me it was almost like each sister represents a different time in my life. Where Iris, the older sister, you know, she's the actress, she's the one who performs on stage, so a lot of that I pulled from my experiences as an actor, which I did when I was younger and a young adult. I did a lot more on stage than I do now, so I kind of pulled a lot of my experiences there, whereas Violet is a little more subdued and a little more in the shadows, and part of that's because she's hiding her illegal magic, but another part of it is because she's a little more introspective and she's more of a writer. You know, she has these beautiful, fantastical stories in her head that she's writing down, and so I kind of drew a little bit there for her. And then I would say, like, between the two, maybe there was also a bit more of the older sister mentality from my personal experience that I sort of interjected with Iris, of a sister who's protective, but at the same time, you know, there's sort of that kind of camaraderie, slightly poking fun, ultimately very loving relationship.
Very true. Very, very true, Brandie. And this next question actually has to talk to you about the magic system. And I've seen a lot of other podcasts about this topic, in the sense that creating your own magic system in the fantasy genre is arguably probably one of the most difficult things to do, because you want to make sure that your magic system is not copying from someone else, but not too original that's going to throw people off, and that it makes sense in your story. So for you, Brandie, how did you create the magic system in your book?
So my first thought when I went into this is I want a rather limited magic system, limited magical abilities. In part because I don't like my magic to be so powerful it can solve too much. And
Okay.
this story, I didn't want their magic to easily solve their problems. They, have to mostly rely on working together and teamwork and a little bit of cunning and a bit of deception and a bit of, quick thinking and a bit of luck, in addition to having a bit of magic. So I didn't want the magic to be too powerful. None of them is the chosen one who can do everything at the snap of their fingers. And the way I decided to do the magic system was there's basically mainly two tiers of magic. There's the illusionist who can create the illusion of objects that, it looks real, but you touch it, there's no depth to it. It vanishes after, a few hours. And those are, while rare, still common enough that it's not unheard of to know of a couple illusionists. And because it's common-ish, because it's not as powerful, the monarch doesn't care so much about them, they're not in danger. And then there's the actual conjurers, who are even more rare, and they're the ones who conjure the actual objects, actual things that, they have the weight. You've made an actual object. And because it's rare, because that ability is more powerful when it comes to fighting a war, they're the ones that the monarchs decided, okay, everyone with those abilities are now immediately conscripted into the military effort. And even there, I wanted to give some hints as to side effects, basically, of the different magic. So you can't just do a magic and pull it off as though you haven't. There's sort of the wisps of smoke. There's sort of each of the magic, the actual conjuring has a certain smell, a certain sense to it, so that if it is happening, you are risking discovery.
Okay, all right. Now, kind of with that in mind, of the difference between illusionists and conjurers, going back to the beginning, I love how you wrote the characters, especially the sisters as well. I love their dynamics, as well as the young bounty hunter who gets thrust into the story. And I won't give a spoiler for this, viewers and listeners, because it is a big plot element. But his story is very, very, very impactful. And I honestly wouldn't mind seeing a spin-off of his story leading up to the Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater. And on the topic of characters, Brandie, this is another fan question. How did you ensure that not only your characters were complex, but it made sense for them to exist in your world? And what I mean by that, and what the viewer is asking, is that I'm sure you've read books where there have been characters that really don't feel like they belong in the story, and they're just there to be the archetype character. I didn't get that sense from the sisters, young bounty hunter, the villain, the uncle. Everyone felt organic and true and complex. So how did you ensure that your characters were those specific things?
So I think part of that comes from my theater background. Is I spend a lot of time on character creation. And when I was an actor, I would spend a lot of time thinking about whatever character I had been cast as, and coming up with details about that character, even if they weren't in the script I was in. And so with my characters here, I do spend a lot of time thinking about, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, what are their habits, even if it's not immediately things that happen on the page, that may or may not happen on the page, but kind of thinking about what are they as sort of well-rounded, conceptualized people, what are their strengths, what are their flaws, and kind of thinking about them as people rather than just as archetypes, sort of, you know, kind of gives you that the specific details without necessarily dumping all that information on the reader at any one point. You're not going to be like, here's 10 pages about this character as soon as you see them. But if you have all those details, if you've internalized all those details, and if you know, like I'll have character Bibles with all those details, you see those details come out throughout the course of writing the book, and throughout the course of editing, you find, you know, different sides of them sort of shine through. Or if you know the character really well, you have a sense of how they're going to respond to the different situations they're, you know, put into.
Absolutely, very true. And all again, the topic of characters and also scenes. Another fan question one of my viewers asked, and this can be as little or as slightly heavy spoilers as you would like, Brandie. But they ask, when writing the Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, what was your favorite scene or character to create, and B, the most challenging character or scene to write?
So I would say my favorite scene, or at least one of my favorite scenes, is basically how I have that first initial scene that came to mind. When I won't say where it is, but I found a place in the story where it basically fits in. And finding that first spark, that first visual that felt so real in my mind, and finding out where that fit in the story was a really delight. I also just really loved writing. I mean, I loved writing all of the characters. I had a lot of fun writing the uncle, the Grand Leopold, who, you know, he runs the theater and he's exuberant and well, kind of a bit over the top, and sort of almost how I would imagine if I, you know, was independently wealthy, running a fantastic, fabulous theater, and just wanting to make sure everything was kind of a spectacle, and just a very fun, very welcoming person who is a little over the top, but at his core too, he also cares very deeply about his nieces. You know, they basically have been thrust into his protection, and he's, you know, never anticipated being sort of a father figure, and has kind of been thrust into that role. So he sometimes stumbles, but at his core, he's still, you know, he's a very caring, very loving person. And also just wants everything to just feel magical for everyone. So that was a character I really had a lot of fun writing. I would say one of the hardest characters to write, or the hardest scenes, was in earlier versions. Harmon, who's another character from the theater, a young man who lives at the theater. I actually had him as one of the POV characters. So
okay.
Now the book has 3 POVs. It's the 2 sisters and Alec the bounty hunter. Earlier versions of the draft had Harmon, who's our set designer. He was one of the characters' point of view, and I love him a lot because he is, you know, he's kind of a foil in some ways. You know, you have Iris and you have Alec, who are sort of these real outgoing, kind of charismatic characters. And then Harmon and Violet, who are a little more shy and quiet and more, you know, more internal, but very artistic. And so it was really fun being able to kind of dive into his backstory and his point of view of things. But after sending it to critique partners and beta readers, we realized that the pacing needed to pick up more. I'm one who, with my earlier drafts, tend to really love sinking into like character development and, you know, these really immersive settings. And people are like, and my early, you know, critique partners are like, that's great, but also we need to get to more of the action. So I did make the decision that I needed to cut his point of view and sort of shuffle a lot of the actions that happened during his chapters, seeing which of the actions needed to happen and kind of moving them into other characters' chapters. And ultimately, I think it did make for a stronger story, because you still have him in here and you still see a lot of the elements of him that I love. But we also get more of the, you know, a bit of a faster pace. But I will say, like, cutting his chapters was really hard during the editing phase.
All right. And now kind of behind the scenes, well, another behind the scenes question is, when you were drafting this out and planning the numerous revisions before sending it to your editor, at what point did you tell your friends and family that you were embarking on another writing venture? Like, how long was it from the Rumpelstiltskin duology that you began writing the magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater?
Immediately.
Oh, right then and there.
Yeah, so a couple things went into that. One, I find that I just continue writing. And part of that is because once I have a book that's edited, that's as perfect as I can make it, and it's off with my agent and being on submission, when my agent is sending it to editors, I get really antsy, and I'm not a patient person. So I'm just sitting, twiddling my thumbs, waiting to hear about a manuscript, I go insane. And so what I found to keep myself from going insane is, once that book is out the door, so to speak, until, you know, if it gets sold and it comes back and then we have more edits to do, then I'll go back into it. But once it's out the door, I need to be working on the next project, whatever that project is, because I can't affect something once it is out of my hands. But what I can do is I can write my next story. And for me, that's especially important. And this was really, really kind of saved my creative soul early on in my writing career, because the first book I wrote that actually landed me an agent never got sold.
Oh, okay.
He put it on submission, he sent it to editors, but it never got picked up. Maybe someday I'll revise it, maybe someday it'll come to light. I don't know. But once I had sent it to my agent at the time, I started writing SPUN. So after like a year of submissions, not getting any traction on this first story, and having to kind of put it on the shelf, which was really hard to do, at the same time, I could be like, okay, but look, now I have this next story to pitch. So it's not as though that one book you write is the end all of your career.
Right.
And even now, I feel that, 3 books in, I still have stories on submission that I'm still getting, waiting on, or getting rejections on, or having it sent out to people. And what I found is that, no matter what's going on outside my control, what I can do is write the next story. So pretty much, once Curse Undone was out the door, so to speak, I immediately was like, okay, what am I going to write next? And for that, it was Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, even when it was in the very early stages, when I didn't know everything that I wanted to happen in it. I knew I wanted it like Victorian-esque era, even though it's a different world fantasy. So I started researching, what daily life was like with that, what theater was like with that. I just started researching kind of the circus life and freak show scenes at the time, because a lot of the characters in this theater has sort of that found family aspect, where they might be considered freak shows, or considered others and outsiders in like the mainstream society. So they've built their own theater community, and they're really their own community in this theater. And that's sort of their found family. So I wanted to see, okay, what was life like there? Like I said, I started taking magic classes, and, I'd be the first to say like, hey, I'm in this class because I want to research for a book I'm writing. No, it's not nonfiction, but I still want to be able to use real magic and fantasy magic. And while I was doing all this various research, kind of bouncing ideas off some of my writing buddies, some of my writing groups, it's great to go and kind of spitball ideas, or be like, hey, I have this idea, but I'm really stuck right here. So start developing characters and really fleshing out my characters, even while I was coming up with the outline. So I spent a lot of time researching and prepping before I even started drafting.
All right. And of course, the thing that all writers dread is the dreaded writer's block. That is such an annoyance to have, but we've encountered it in our careers numerous times over. for you, Brandie, how do you overcome the dreaded writer's block?
So part of what I do is I have found, for me, I need at least some sort of outline for my book, even if it's a loose one, to give me some direction. When I'm drafting, especially my first draft, I am more than happy to, I fill it in with a ton of the comments of things to go back to. If I'm stuck at something, I will just give myself like a little comment of like, research this element later and keep going, or write epic battle scene here and then skip that part and keep going, because I've found that I need to finish my complete first draft before I go back and edit. And for me, I have to just give myself permission to write a real cruddy first draft.
Right.
And even if it's not as cruddy as I think it is in my head, I still, even when I think it's like, I'm like, oh, this is awful, it's the worst thing I've ever written, it usually isn't, but I need to nonetheless, even if I feel that way, I need to like plow through, get that first draft done, because then I can start the editing, then I can start making it look better and nicer. So if I'm stuck on a section, I'll just make myself a note to like come back to it later and keep going, because one, that keeps me going. I don't get overly frustrated because I'm just stuck in one spot. And what it also does is it puts whatever that problem is in the back of my brain. So I may still kind of casually be thinking about it. And a lot of times I come up with solutions when it's sort of percolating in the back of my mind.
Right.
So writing, the next chapter and continuing on. And then, maybe a week later, I'm like, oh, I figured out what that problem should be, or I figured out how to solve that issue here. Instead of like just focusing on the problem and getting frustrated. So that's kind of how I deal with writer's block.
Very true. Absolutely. Very, very true. I've done that myself. And in fact, I should probably get back to that. I've actually planned out and written the outlines for the next 2 books in my Tales from the Gathering series, which I'm so excited to get back into writing. But those ones will probably be late 2026, maybe early 2027, because next year I plan, don't know how I'm going to do this, but I plan to get out at least 3 books out, 2 novels and a short story. The short story is going to be in the middle, though more than likely it'll probably be 2, just because.
Incredible and a bit insane. I love that for you.
Thank you, Brandie. And this has made me look back on my journey, as an author of, what does it mean to be an author in the digital age and the social media age?
Mm-hmm.
And I love asking authors this question because the industry has changed in the last 20 years or so. From the query trenches are still going to be here for all of us. I've talked to a lot of people who have been in the trenches, a little traumatic for some people. And for those that don't know, querying books is probably among the most nervous and fueled anxiety any author is going to experience, next to an editor saying this about a book. It is the most anxiety fueled moment in an author's career, next to now, of course, social media and the launching of one's book, because social media also increases our anxiety. Yes, social media is a great tool to have. It can allow us to meet new people, branch out into other categories, network, learn of upcoming events, and so forth. But it's emotionally draining, it's tiring, it's exhausting. We are not marketers. We are not, well, most of us, I should say, most of us are not marketers by
tiring.
choice.
Professional marketer, it's tiring.
No, it's all right, Brandie. It's all right. But generally speaking, not all of us have at least some kind of like business mindset when it comes to writing our books. And I'm just very curious, Brandie, for you, looking back on your career and seeing how the industry has changed into this new digital social media era, what has still disciplined you to still be the same creative person you were when you first began your career as an author?
So my career as an author has really been like the last 5 or 6 years. I think SPUN came out about 4 or 5 years ago. So, you know, social media was pretty prevalent even then. And couple things. One thing, as a marketer, I do actually have hosted a couple like seminars that I've given about marketing for creatives and for writers. And part of that is think about what you're posting in terms of what your potential readers want to see.
Right.
As opposed to, because you're not marketing for yourself. You're marketing for your readers because you want them to be interested in your books. And sometimes it's interested in you as an author as well, because hopefully if they read one of your books and they love it, they can then read your other books. You know, and also connecting with you as a person. So like my Instagram is pretty much all like my books and my pets. So anyone on my Instagram will see lots of puppy and bird pictures as well as my books. And what I did find though, that kind of was a big shift from when I was a writer to when I got my book deal and became an author, is that I needed to devote, there was time for writing, but then I also had to devote time for non-writing author tasks. And those kind of tasks I viewed as, you know, posting on social media, as writing my newsletter, as doing giveaways, as, you know, submitting for events, doing events, kind of all of the promotional elements that go into being an author, which are separate from the actual writing. And it's trying to find the balance of both worlds, knowing that you can't do 100% of anything at one time. You can't spend 100% of your time writing and do the social media / promotions. You can't do 100% promotions of all your time and still get the writing done. And as many of us, also the rest of our lives, you know, a lot of us, myself included, have day jobs, we have families, or, you know, other responsibilities, or just other interests, other places we need to refill our well and take care of ourselves, and, you know. And what I found is trying to find a balance of all of them overall. And I don't always find the balance every day. Honestly, for the last 2 months, I've done very little writing because I have been doing event after event after event as part of my launch for Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater. I love the events. I love meeting people, but they're also tiring. And so I haven't had a lot of energy for writing. So I have to kind of give myself permission to be like, okay, the next 2 months is going to be a lot of events, a lot of promotion. And then after that, I'll have some time off to write. Or, you know, thinking like next year when I don't, you know, if I don't have a book coming out, I can spend a lot more time writing and a smaller percentage of the time doing the social media, the promotion. And so it's really coming up with what are the priorities and what needs to happen for each and what would be nice to happen for each, but don't need to happen. And so that's why you're not trying to do everything all the time. I tried to do everything when SPUN came out. I tried to reach out to all the TikTok influencers and all the Instagrammers. And honestly, I just burned myself out. It was exhausting. And then realized the internet is a very large place. You're not going to reach everyone. A lot of us don't have the kind of money to be doing huge paid campaigns and just have to kind of be okay with that. If we're not, you know, if our publisher isn't doing a huge campaign, we, you know, cannot necessarily supplement with the same amount of ad dollars. Maybe we could do a small ad spend to just push out the book trailer. You know, do like a collab with several other authors and do like a group giveaway and kind of assess what's going to be important and try to hit those, you know, hit those 5 things, as opposed to, you know, wearing yourself out trying to do 20 things and then not have anything to write. So
that is very true. That is very, very true, Brandie. And that kind of goes into this next question, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on. And this is the debate of what era are we in terms of authors? Now, the reason I ask this question is context for this. I've been doing this show now for about 6-7 years. And just looking back on my videos, Just on YouTube alone, I began in 2022. So I began podcasting on Anchor and Spotify back, I want to say 2017, 2018, give or take. And just on YouTube alone, just since 2022, the end of 2022, entering 2023, I have interviewed a total of almost close to 200 authors, and it's absolutely insane. A lot of some historians, academics, students, so forth. It's absolutely insane. A lot of people from the theater world as well. And from these interactions and interviews I've had with people, I realized that the majority of them, and like myself, all began during the COVID years where everybody was in lockdown and everyone really kind of rekindled their passion for the creative side of them. And when the floodgates opened, the publishing industry alone was just swept up in this flood of new talent and new voices. And I think it's amazing and beautiful. But now looking at the industry now, going into my fourth book, I've had a change in perspective where originally I thought we were in a golden age, but now I see we're shifting towards more of an iron age. And what I mean by that is being an author is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is not an easy moneymaker.
Not even a
It is a grind.
game for the most part.
Yes, very true. It's a lot of hard work, dedication. It's a hassle and a grind. And some people knew that from the get-go. Others did not. And there has been this, I want to say shift where you now have those that went into being authors just to make a quick buck and those that are truly passionate about, the written word. And in less than 5 years, a new problem has erupted, which is the rise of generative AI in the publishing industry and how it is detrimental to us authors, artists, editors, narrators, everybody. AI is always going to be a part of our lives. There's no getting past it, viewers and listeners. But generative AI is where all of us draw the line in terms of making content. AI is super helpful when it comes to organizing everything. Like I've had AI like refine my outlines to like make sure it makes sense. And I'm very helpful. I'm very thankful for that. But when it comes to writing the story, that's all me. So ultimately, Brandie, the question is this: with all that said, in your opinion, what era do you think we are entering in for this new age of authors? Are we still in a golden age, the iron age, or some people have said the dark cyber age?
I hopefully I'm not too naive that I don't think we're in a dark cyber age. I think there's I do see a lot of pushback for generative AI stories and artwork. And so I don't think we're at a point where we need to worry that generative AI will replace human created stories. I don't think it's good enough, honestly. Between golden age or iron age, it's interesting you mentioned a lot of people starting writing during COVID, because actually I got my first book deal pretty much right into COVID. So I was actually almost on the other end of trying to like figure out a lot of virtual promotions and events at a time when we couldn't do in-person things. And on the business side, I will say I've had a book on submission for a while. I've talked to some other author friends who've also been on submission for quite a while. So it is a bit challenging there. But I kind of feel like humans want good stories. And no matter what age we're in, if writing stories, if telling stories is important to your soul to keep doing it, I find that writing and a career as an author, it doesn't need to make you rich. It doesn't even need to pay your bills. But if getting stories out there is important to you, keep telling stories, because I think no matter, what the future holds, we're going to want stories.
Yes.
And make it in a way that is sustainable for you. So a lot of times, you know, this is something I've even had to like work on myself, the idea of like, oh, well, if you don't do it full time, it doesn't count. And that's ludicrous and wrong, because you're still telling stories, and whether or not capitalism has rewarded you for it doesn't mean your story is more or less valuable. And in a way, if you are even working full time and you're writing on the side, that means you also have the freedom to write whatever appeals to you most. So there's, you know, that silver lining as well. And just do what you're able to do. As writing for me has been a marathon, not a sprint. You know,
Yeah.
spent years writing, years editing. Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater came out last month. I started researching probably in 2019. It wasn't consistently through all those years, because like I got my Gold SPUN book deal, so I had to kind of back burner Dragonfly Theater while I worked with the editor, you know, and then went back to Dragonfly Theater, and then worked on a book launch for Gold SPUN, and then went back to Dragonfly Theater, and, you know, worked on Curse Undone, and, you know, so it wasn't I have only spent my time doing this, but it has been years of writing, of editing, of going critique groups, beta readers, pitching to agents, and then agents to editors, and so it's a long process. And do what you need to do for yourself so that you can stay in that process long term, if that is what you want to do. And I think if you keep doing it and you keep telling stories, some are going to hit and some are going to resonate with readers.
Very true, Brandie. Absolutely very true. Now I turn over to the business side of being an author, which I'm very eager to hear your insight onto this aspect of the publishing journey. Now, as a little icebreaker question, looking back on your career from a marketing standpoint, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of launching and promoting your books?
You know, a lot of it's been learning experiences, and I don't always know what pushes the needle and what doesn't. So I think for me, also just being able to be willing to try different things has been really helpful. And also trying things that I enjoy. Like, I enjoy in-person events. I love meeting people and talking to people about, you know, about books, about my books, but also just about books, about writing. Dragonfly Theater, I'm happy to geek out with people about theater. You know, and trying the different social media platforms to see which ones I could post regularly on, and letting go of some of the others. And I'll say not so much that I regret, but I definitely found that I can't try to do everything all the time.
Right.
I don't have the energy. I don't have the time. You know, I don't have the money. And knowing that and also accepting that I can't necessarily compete with the A-list titles that the big publishers are going to put out in terms of marketing. You know, I just can't compete with that. I don't have the time, money, resources that they do, but that doesn't mean I can't still, you know, do promotions and activations to get my books out there. And knowing that even if one book isn't a huge success, it's been part of my catalog too. If, you know, for when someone picks up a new book of mine and enjoys my work, they'll see that there are, you know, back titles also that I have available.
Very true. Very, very true, Brandie. Now, this fan question I have been saving specifically for you, because I have mentioned it before on previous episodes, but it is a very interesting situation that I've been noticing in the publishing industry. And this viewer asks, in your opinion, do you believe that the rise of indie authors and hybrid authors and small press authors is in conjunction to the recent events of the big five publishing houses, where it's now become more so of a gambling den, in the sense of these major publishing houses betting all of their money, resources, and prepping on books that may or may not be as profitable as they were led to believe?
You know, I know people who have published with Big Five that have gotten a lot of support. I also know people who've published with Big Five that have gotten a lot less support. And in terms of, you know, more people self-publishing or doing hybrid or smaller press, I think a lot of it depends really what are your, you know, what are your goals and what have you tried? You know, I have some friends who are very, very successful self-published authors. They also need to be very well-rounded as to all aspects of the book creation and promotion. So, you know, if they're going to be the ones who are going to need to manage, either create or outsource, you know, the cover art design, getting all the listings up, you know, hiring editors or audiobook narrators and doing all of their marketing, all of their promotion. It's, you know, it's not that one thing is right or wrong, you know, but it's what you're comfortable doing. Want to do, you know, you get control of everything, which is great. But on the other hand, you have to control everything.
Yes.
And I think too, it's nice that there are more options for authors and can kind of almost have like sort of staggered or levels of goals. Like maybe first you want to try to hit the Big Five publishers, and maybe if you hit them or your agent hits them and don't get any bites, then start looking at smaller presses. You know, and then maybe consider if you want to go hybrid, or then self-publish, which is just one, you know, one sort of path. And I think it is becoming more and more accessible for people to self-publish. So because that's the case, you can be seeing more people doing it. But I think as far as like the trend, I think ultimately it does come down to, you know, what's a writer's goal, and sort of barring that goal, is there like a backup plan or plan B, C, D, and E?
Very well said, Brandie. Very well said. And now another aspect of the marketing side is also understanding one's audience. And I definitely think that is an important thing to discuss for authors, in the sense of when we're writing our books, we know that we are the target audience first and foremost because we know the story better than anyone else. But when we go about publishing our stories, that's when we have to decide, okay, what genre are exactly we writing for? What readership group does actually fall under? And probably the biggest thing is balancing our individuality, our storytelling as authors, while also understanding the genre that we are writing in. I don't think a lot of people really understand or take into account that aspect, because I'm sure you've seen, Brandie, as a reader, books have had a tagline, the next so-and-so. From a reader's point of view, that's going to be engaging. It's going to get us intrigued. But what happens when it doesn't live up to the expectations? The author has to be aware of that. So ultimately, Brandie, for your books, how did you figure out the audience that you wanted to write for, as well as balancing the types of storytelling that was expected by the genre, but also staying true to yourself as a creative, showing your authenticity?
Yeah, so I definitely, when I do give marketing seminars for creatives, I do actually have kind of a Venn diagram of like what makes your story unique and original versus what your target audience sort of expects to see in a story. And it definitely is sort of that balance of the two. Like when I wrote Goldspun, I definitely wanted to give kind of a unique twist on the story, but at the same time, there are elements of Rumpelstiltskin I knew my readers would want to see. You know, there's the, you know, the straw into gold and how that comes about and what the repercussions are, the importance of a name. But on the other hand, kind of making it my own, adding elements that weren't in the original, like in Goldspun, the miller's daughter's a con artist, and instead of being sort of this gremlin character, Rumpelstiltskin's this mysterious fae. So that's sort of the way of both pulling in what you know readers are going to expect from, in that case, a fairy tale retelling, versus adding your own originality. For Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, one of the ways that I was pitching it is, for fans of. So I'm not saying this is the next whatever. I'm not saying it is, the same as, but I'm saying this has sort of the vibes. Like something I'm hearing a lot now is the vibe. So for example, my story, I say, it has kind of vibes similar to the Night Circus, Caraval, stories like that. So I'm not promising this will be the next version of them, but I'm saying if you like that feel, if in this case, sort of that theatrical, that mystery, that sort of magic intertwining with it, element, they know those kind of elements will be in this book. Because you do want to provide people with a new story, but you also want them to, as readers, they have certain expectations of what they want in a book and what they read. So you want to show them how your story will check those boxes for them.
Absolutely, Brandie. That is actually a very good point. Absolutely, very true. And now we're actually going to my favorite segment, which is some rapid fire questions. Okay. So a lot of some of these are fan questions as well in the mix. So the first question is, which is more difficult to write, an emotional scene or a conflict scene?
For me, it's a conflict scene, and that's just because I love diving into the emotions. I'm more than happy to sit sobbing at my computer with my characters.
All righty. Next one. Ooh, probably my favorite. Which of the 5 senses is the most difficult to showcase in writing?
Smell. I think smell, because there's nothing visual about it, and the way that a lot of times we start writing, and a lot of early career writers, you'll start by describing everything you see, and you kind of forget about the elements that aren't as visual. So I think smell is definitely one that gets underutilized, but it also is very visceral because there's a lot of like sense memory that comes from smell. So describe smell well, it can just make for a more visceral experience for your audience.
I have to agree. And also one of my previous guests said touch is probably another one that is very difficult, because when we always say, oh, he touched the stone floor. Well, what does it feel like? I mean, stones, depending on the kind and the grain, is going to be rough and edgy or smooth and soft. So it all depends.
Is it sun-baked? Has it been, frozen over? Yeah.
Absolutely. Next rapid fire question. Ooh, themes or tropes in storytelling?
Yes. Yes, I feel like both are important, and they're different elements of a story. So the stories generally have both. I can definitely say mine has, themes of found family and, sisterhood, but, tropes of like an enemies to lovers. And so I think both are good ways of describing stories.
All right. Nice. Next one. Ooh, this is a new one.
Ooh.
Which music or song would you say best reflects your stories?
I actually usually put together playlists for each book I'm writing, and it's usually just for myself while I'm writing it, and they'll like have hundreds of songs by the time I'm done, because I've been drafting for months and months and months. So whenever a certain song just calls to me about one of my stories, I'll like just put it into that playlist. So they just end up being massively long, and I'm sure my husband would be sick of hearing them if I played them for him, because I'm playing them on repeat all the time. Specifically for Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, I get a lot of like big musical energy from it. So like Phantom of the Opera, Moulin Rouge, a lot of those really dramatic, big visual musicals.
Ooh, and actually that leads into the next question from one of my viewers who asked, if your book was adapted into a film, musical, or Broadway play, who would you want to be in the film or Broadway production?
Oh, goodness. That is an excellent question. I'd have to think about it. I'm going to say Ariana Grande right now because everyone loves Wicked, so then they'll come see Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater. See, that's also the marketer in me.
All right, all right. And kind of as a bonus question for the film, if your book was adapted into a film, not a musical, who would you want to either A, direct the film, and B, star in the film?
Ooh, I feel like Greta Gerwig could do like just really fantastic visuals with this one.
I can see that.
And this book and even Goldspun, you know, my books I feel are very visual books. So I feel like that would be a great view on it. And also, as I do have, you know, a lot of female main character energy in these books, I feel like she'd really do justice for them.
Nice.
You're
Very, very
listening to
nice.
this, just call me.
Awesome. And oh, this is a blast from the past question. So this commenter and viewer asks, what are some books or authors that have helped you in terms of research or narrative style?
Lee Bardugo's Six of Crows is a great example of multi-POV in YA. So that one I really love as multiple point of view. In terms of like research for this book, I did a lot of research into like Victorian era theater and so forth. So I don't really have authors per se. I did sort of pull a little bit on some of the like wittier satirical playwrights, so like Oscar Wilde, kind of a little flavor of that. I would say in terms of sort of that playwriting element.
Ooh, nice. Very, very nice. And okay, this is the big question. It's a three-parter before you get to the final two questions. So, in your opinion, Brandie, which is probably the most daunting moment in an author's career? Knowing when to stop writing or knowing when to say the book is finished?
I would say knowing when the book is finished, because for me, when I draft beginning to end, and I have to do it that way. So I know exactly when I'm done writing. But then when I go back and edit, it's a lot more nebulous because I can always say, oh, you know, maybe it needs a little more tweaking here, or maybe it needs a little more tweaking there. You know, or maybe I've gotten feedback from one person that they didn't like this one scene, but a bunch of other people did. So do I change it? Don't I? So knowing when the book's finished is, I would say, is the harder element for me.
Nice. And now we arrive at the final two questions of this incredible author's interview. So we talked about a lot of things, Brandie, in this interview, from your background in theater, how that inspired your writing, crafting your voice, what the reactions been like, and ultimately how you apply your background in entertainment marketing to go give you like an edge, so to speak, and also helping others craft their stories and learn new strategies. Ultimately, at the end of the day, A, what do you want people to take away from your books? And B, what is your word of wisdom to other writers and other creatives who may be watching this interview right now?
So as far as the takeaway, it depends, you know, kind of what people are looking for. If anyone's, you know, people are just looking for fun, fantasy, magical escapism, I feel like I definitely have that with these books, especially because at least I very much want to escape a lot of elements going on in the real world these days. A lot of my books do have deeper kind of elements, deeper themes. Goldspun a lot of it has to do with like sort of prejudice of the outsiders, what human versus fae, and the malicious, you know, lies that they each come up with the others, and then they're forced to interact. Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater has a lot to do with trying to both survive and even thrive in a world where those in power are, you know, making kind of evil choices, really. You know, the king in this book is, you know, carrying on this war with the colonies that, you know, our main characters don't want anything to do with, but also don't have really any political power either, and are trying to live their lives and, you know, in a way that is still meaningful for them, even when there are these overarching kind of awful things in the world. So that is hopefully some level of hope. And then as far as advice I would give to other writers is build up and maintain your writing community. A lot of times writing can be a very lonely task because it's us sitting in front of our keyboards or with pen and paper by ourselves for hours and hours at a time. And a lot of the business side involves lots of waiting, lots of rejection.
Yes.
And so it's really important to have those other people in your community, whether it's critique partners or writing groups or, you know, beta readers or, you know, anyone who just also enjoys the kind of genres that you like, and being able to support each other, you know, being able to cheer people on and be cheered on yourself for your wins, and being able to support it and encouraged even through the losses and the rejections is so important to kind of keep going. Because as I said earlier, this is a, you know, more than likely it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Excellent. A perfect ending to this incredible author interview for the month of November. Thank everyone for joining us for another amazing episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. And thank you all for joining us for the final author interview for the month of November. I want to give a huge thank you to my friend Brandie June for coming on the show and telling us all about her books. Now, Brandie, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out, buy copies of your books? And do you have any upcoming announcements you would like to share? Any more appearances people can look forward to for the rest of 2025 and possibly 2026?
So my website, brandiejune.com, has all my social media handles. I'm most active on Instagram, semi-active on TikTok and Facebook. And I also have my my event page on there that has all the events that I have coming up. I am actually pretty much wrapping up events for the rest of this year. And then I already have some events planned throughout 2026. Everything's up on my website. You can also sign up for my newsletter there. I usually send it out about once a month, and it has, you know, the events that I'm doing, you know, what my books are. All my books are available pretty much wherever you buy books online. And that's really the best place to find me.
Absolutely. I will link all that down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. And also, on a final note, if you are looking for a Christmas gift for 2025, you have the perfect books right here, Magic at the Grand Dragonfly Theater, which I will post a link down below. And also make sure to check out Brandie's duology series, the Rumpelstiltskin retelling, as well as pre-ordering a copy of my fourth book, which is coming out on Christmas Eve, or depending on where you are in the world, maybe Christmas Day. The Kindle is available for pre-order on Amazon. If you're here in the States, the paperback and ebook is available for pre-order on Barnes & Noble, and the print version will be available on Amazon a few days before the release. So all that will be provided down below in the description of this video, and make sure to follow us on our socials to stay up to date of where we're going to be planning our next events. And who knows, you may actually see Brandie and myself together at a book event sometime next year. So make sure to follow us at our socials to stay up to date. Until next time, everyone, thank you so much for your love and support. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all new information for the December lineup, the final lineup for 2025. And as always, make sure again to check out all of us at our socials down below. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful evening wherever you are in the world. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And we'll see you back in December. Have a wonderful day, everybody.